Well, let's welcome Christy Smith.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight. Even though my opponent decided not to attend, it's great when forums do still offer that opportunity, because sometimes candidates strategically choose when they do and don't want to be accountable to the public. And it's my goal from this point forward, and if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, to always be accountable and available to you. So for those of you who haven't, and I apologize, there are so many in the audience who have heard my dog and pony show, but for those who have not, my name is Christy Smith, and I'm a candidate for State Assembly in the 38th District, which includes Castaic, Santa Clarita, all of Santa Clarita, out to Agua Dulce in the east, and then goes south along the 5 corridor till it hits the 118 and tracks the 118 corridor all the way out and encompasses all of Simi Valley. And the southern border in the San Fernando Valley is Devonshire Boulevard. So geographically, it's a very large district. In terms of voters, we should all be very proud. The people who live in this area do vote. We have one of the highest voting percentages of many of the assembly districts in the state, which is just based on your community's total population. That's how an assembly district is allotted, but in some assembly districts, not necessarily everyone is a registered voter. We happen to have a very high percentage here who are, so that's something to be proud of. I am a longtime member of this community. In fact, used to be a resident a couple of blocks up. My first apartment right after I was married was in Canyon Country, right on Solomon Road there. I went to Hart High School, graduate of Hart High School, attended Peachland Elementary School, Placerita Junior High School, College of the Canyons, and transferred from College of the Canyons to UCLA. And after graduating from UCLA, spent a few years working at the U.S. Department of Education in Washington, D.C., where I was a policy analyst, and then moved home to good old Santa Clarita to raise our children with my husband. And I have 2 girls and have lived here back in the community with our family for 19 years now. We've been back in the SCV after our trip to Washington. So this community is near and dear to me. So the opportunity to run for this office and to be able to serve this community and serve all of you, friends and neighbors, is something that I take very, very seriously and have worked very earnestly to get to know as many of you as I can and as many of the local issues that I can, so that I take that knowledge and experience with me when I head up to Sacramento, hopefully in November. So I'm currently a school board member for the Newhall School District, which is the 10-school elementary district on the easternmost part of the westernmost part of Santa Clarita Valley. And I've done that for 2 terms now. And in that capacity, I've served for the California School Boards Association as a locally elected delegate to the statewide body that discusses school policy. And I've also served locally as the Legislative Affairs Vice President for our own local trustees association, which I'm proud to serve on with 2 of our fine College of the Canyons board members who are here tonight. So I come to public service honestly and earnestly. It is work that I love to do. I love to be of service, and I actually love public policy, which is boring. That is frankly the boring part of the job, and sometimes the most contentious part when you're talking about environmental resources or, how we best plan for getting rid of trash, which isn't pretty, but somebody's got to do it, right? So I do actually enjoy that work, and what I really enjoy about that work is the opportunity, as I mentioned, to bring parties together, and parties aren't always in agreement on the best way to handle a situation, but we do need to work together to build strong communities, and we've done very well for ourselves in that respect here in Santa Clarita for a number of years, and we need to continue to honor that mode of thinking and that type of growth. So if I'm elected, there are a number of policies that are really important to me and things that I would like to work on. Public education, obviously, in particular, is near and dear to my heart. Environmental concerns, of course, I'm very proud to be endorsed by both the Sierra Club and the League of Conservation Voters. Local transportation is another big issue that we all need to grapple with, and particularly for those of us who were here, during the earthquake. We're one earthquake away from being geographically isolated again, and we need to make sure that we've got infrastructure in place that prevents that from happening and also allows for people to move goods and services in and out of this area and for people to be able to commute to work. Our future urban planning regionally needs to be smart. We need to be thinking about our water infrastructure. We need to be thinking about how we're planning housing and making sure we can accommodate that growth. So those issues are important to me as well. Equal pay for equal work, which we do a little bit better here in the state of California, making sure that women are on parity with what men make, but we could continue to do better. Women's healthcare choices and healthcare advocacy is something that's important to me. But overall, I think looking at the well-being of our communities, economically, educationally, in terms of our open space and our environment, that will be something I'll work hard on every day if I'm elected. So I would be happy to entertain any question. And when I say any, I literally mean any. If you've gotten a piece of mail in your mailbox that you say, hey, I just saw this really ugly, nasty thing about you, please don't be embarrassed to bring it up, because I am happy to address any of those questions.
Something about that money that you spent could have been used for teachers' salary instead of spent on what it was. Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. So what has happened in public education, and if you follow the news at all, you've noticed this, is that we have moved into a time where kids don't necessarily just go to their neighborhood school that's within a mile or two from home, and that's just automatically where we go. In the state and across the country, we now have charter schools, which are independent but publicly funded schools that can be located anywhere in a community if a school district approves them. So we have a couple here. We have Einstein Academy and we have SCVI. And so parents have that option, that choice, to not have their kid in the neighborhood community school, but to enroll them in one of these other institutions. The impact of that, though, that isn't often explained to folks, is that when that child leaves the neighborhood school, that neighborhood school does lose resources. And it makes it very, very hard for local schools to budget year to year, not knowing which children are going to be with them and which children may opt out, which families may opt out for another education alternative. So a number of the local school districts have experienced a decline in enrollment because of parents making these other choices. And so it puts us in a position where we need to talk about the good things that we do. And we didn't used to have to do that. Public schools, you knew your neighborhood school was good, and that's where you went and that's where you enrolled. But now we feel a need to advertise and to tell families all the great things that are happening in our public schools. And so in the Newhall School District in particular, there are a lot of things we're very, very proud of. We have fully funded science labs on each of our campuses, and we have very high test scores. We have wonderful teachers. We have comprehensive arts and music education. And so that information is something that we shared through a marketing program, and we did spend money on it. But in spending that money, we retained money because we retained students. There were families that stayed with us or families that enrolled starting their new kindergartners with us who might have chosen one of these other alternatives. So, the concept of free market economy in education, I think, probably started off with good intentions, but it is one of those trends that has had unintended and negative consequences, and this is one of them. Public schools now really need to market themselves in order to, quote unquote, stay competitive and keep students there with them. So our district did spend those resources, and I will say that I didn't do it alone. When you're a school board member, you never act alone. I'm one of 5 people. It was a unanimous vote to expend those funds, and I am one of 2 Democrats on a board that is majority Republicans. And in fact, one of the gentlemen who has endorsed my opponent also took the same vote that I took. So that's why I find it particularly interesting that that mailer is phrased the way that it was. Those are not monies that would have been used towards a classroom teacher or towards that purpose. This was money that was specifically allocated and set aside for this one-time purpose. And I will also say I'm very proudly endorsed by every teaching organization in the state. The California Federation of Teachers, the California Teachers Association, the California Faculty Association, and the California School Employees Association have all endorsed my candidacy as someone who is good and effective for public schools.
Hi, Christy.
Hi, Michelle.
What I want you to address is, can you talk a little bit about the criticism that you've taken from some that you won't be able to be as effective in Sacramento because of your ties, and that you won't be able to be effective in standing up for things of interest to this community? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, the criticism has been that because I am a Democrat, I will vote in lockstep with other Democrats, and that has consistently not been the case. In fact, there have been a number of times in the last few years where I've almost had that blue card revoked because I have stood my ground on things that I didn't agree with my party on. And at the end of the day, and what I opened and introduced myself with is I am a long-term resident of this community. I will not be able to come back here on Fridays from Sacramento and face all of the members of my community if I have not done the right thing by them. So for me, this really is about serving community first and not party. But I will have better access as a member of the majority party there. I will not be going to Sacramento to merely be a protest vote. I have been endorsed by the leadership of the Democratic Party, which means I have access to some goal setting and potentially to some resources to bring back to this community, which are significantly needed. So I appreciate that question, but I really do stand my ground. I stand on my own 2 feet, and the criticisms are baseless. And really, people will have 2 years to figure that out. And if I haven't held up my end of the bargain at the end of those 2 years, people are more than welcome to vote in somebody else.
Christy, one of the major things around locally is water. What in the assembly could be done because we get a lot of state water here, because of the drought, and everybody's well aware of that now. And I don't even know if the assembly can do anything to push water recycling, because obviously our local officials haven't planned for a 5-year drought or a 6-year drought, and we're wasting a lot of recycled water that could be used in the area. So what could an assembly member do about any of that stuff and our water issues? Yeah,
well, the first big challenge is that the Delta Tunnels project is facing opposition from pretty much every side. Environmentalists don't like it. Water conservationists don't like it. So I think that project may not go the way that the governor had envisioned. So there is going to have to be, first of all, a big rethink of deliverance of water, northern to southern California. And then I would really take an all of the above approach, because all of the strategies you mentioned are important. We need to be recapturing runoff when and if ever we do get rain in reasonable ways, and that's about good urban planning, good construction policies. Water recycling investment needs to happen, and in fact, I have also said publicly I was not a fan nor an advocate of the high-speed rail project. At the time that went before voters, our single most emergent need in this state was water and water infrastructure. We need water transportation much more than we need to be putting people on a train that ends up probably not even being built and wasting a lot of taxpayer money. So an all of the above strategy: water recycling, water recapture, smarter water policies going forward, and a statewide water needs assessment that is mandated to be updated every 2 years, regardless of drought conditions, because it's something in California we will consistently have to stay on top of, and we won't ever be able to take for granted again based on what we know is true and imminent with climate change.
Hi, Christy. Susie Rizzo. And I'm curious how you view, decreasing prison populations.
With respect to the initiatives that have already passed?
With respect to the initiatives that are on the ballot, and in general, how you would handle decreasing prison populations, how you would handle locating prisoners inside California, outside California, reducing prison terms, felonies to misdemeanors.
Right. So what concerns me about the initiatives that have already passed is I'm a big advocate and a big believer in evidence-based public policy making. And at the time those initiatives were passed to lower thresholds for some terms and then to release people early, we did not do an extensive recidivism study on those folks with a very thorough tracking of which individuals ended up back in the criminal justice system within what period of time. We also have not consistently tracked nor provided for individuals who really significantly more than they need incarceration, need mental health services, and need drug rehabilitation. So the first thing I would want to take a look at is any data that is available to make wiser decisions. What has concerned me is that the law enforcement organizations I have spoken with anecdotally have told me what it has done to their workload and what it has meant back out on the streets. And it has increased their workload, and it has made it much more difficult. And if we are disincentivizing penalty and prisons do become a revolving door, we do have that issue and that problem to contend with. On the other hand, we have the issue economically of people not having opportunities. And so often they are seeking opportunities that are criminally based, particularly and almost always in the drug trade. And so how do we provide economic opportunity and educational opportunity so that people do have other pathways? So it is a very complex, multi-pronged problem. You know, we have gone in California from under a decade ago, 8% of our general fund budget was spent on prisons to now 11%, and that encroachment continues to increase. But I think to address it by decreasing penalties and releasing people without anything that inhibits recidivism, like mental health services or drug rehabilitation, I think is wrong-headed, because we're just creating a revolving door, and it becomes just as costly as it is now. They're just there for a shorter term, but they're coming back in and out and continuing to burden the court system. So it is a complex problem, but it's multifaceted. First of all, improving education. Second of all, mental health, drug treatment programs, and eventually getting a better handle on what are effective prison programs once people are incarcerated. What should be happening when an individual spends time in prison, and what is that process like when they leave the prison system in order for them to be able to rehabilitate themselves with felony expungement and all of the things that go along to then becoming a productive member of society again.
Speaking of the prisons, I wonder what your view is of the privatization system of the prisons.
I don't support it because I think it creates a perverse incentive in the system. I think when there are for-profit prisons, then you have an entire industry that feels the need to create a population for itself. And then that has impacts in terms of judges being elected and officials being elected and laws that are passed, particularly at the initiative level. So I do think that prisons should be state-run and state-operated.
So we do a lot of activities up there. There's activities for the kids and stuff, and we just had 47 veterans take them out in boats fishing and stuff. And a year ago, the whole lake was closed in the summertime, the hottest time of the year. And, they're building all these houses and everything and stuff. I don't know what we're going to do. They say wait for the water in Lake Tahoe. Lake Tahoe's not getting anything. It's just a big mess.
Yeah. Yeah, because in Southern California, we're entirely dependent on the snowpack and water from Northern California. I mean, we have
I can't put my boat in the water up there anymore. So I go to Lake Havasu. Mm-hmm. Boy, they got a lot of water up there because it comes from the Colorado River.
Right, because it's coming out of Colorado.
Transfer it down here would be nice, but that's not going to happen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're just waiting on the benefits of Mother Nature to kind of repay us back a little bit, and it may be a long time. And in the meantime, it's really more about survival and making sure we manage our own local groundwater resources really efficiently and effectively. And as Rick pointed out, making sure we start some water recycling programs. All right, so I'll wrap up. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. You can find out more information on my website or contact me directly there if another question pops up for you. But again, I'm dedicated to the practice, really, because it's something that I've practiced as a school board member, but open, honest, transparent, and effective public service. And if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, this will not be the last you've seen of me. I will be happy to come back on a regular basis. And of course, any of you would always be welcome in my office, or to call or to reach out, so that the governance of this community is something that we really all start to embrace and do together. So thank you.